Ever get your coffee order taken and wonder, like, could a robot do this?
Yeah.
I mean, someone out there's got to be trying to make that happen, right? Well, today's deep dive is all about robots in the hospitality industry. But we're not just speculating. We're going deep into a chapter from the book. Hold on to your hats, folks. It's called Information and Communication Technologies in Tourism 2023.
Catchy title. Right.
It's a mouthful, but hey, we're all about serious research here. But seriously, this research isn't just theory. It's about how people like you and me actually experience robot service. And to make sense of it all, we have an expert joining us who's amazing at connecting those research dots to the bigger picture. So welcome. Always glad to have someone who can cut through the academic jargon.
It's great to be here. You know, what I find really interesting about this particular chapter is that it goes beyond just asking, can robots do the job of, say, a waiter? It digs into something way more interesting, how robots actually change the entire customer experience.
Right. Like, it's not just about getting your food, it's the whole vibe of the thing. And one of the big takeaways, at least for me, was that a lot of people don't just see robot service as replacing humans. They see it as a totally different experience altogether.
Yeah, that's a key point. The researchers found that, yeah, people are looking for convenience and speed when they go to a place with robot service. Makes sense. But, and this is cool, they also said it felt new and fun, like not something they'd get from a regular human interaction.
It's like the novelty itself is part of the entertainment value, especially, I'm guessing, for people who are already into tech. Which, speaking of, is something important to remember about this study. The people they talked to weren't exactly your average folks. They were people who, sought out and chose to have experiences involving robots.
Right. You're hitting on a really important point about research like this. The researchers even say themselves that this self-selection thing could mean the results are a bit skewed. Like, we don't know how someone who's not that excited about technology would feel about robot service, or maybe someone from a different generation. It makes you wonder, can robots really appeal to everyone, or are they always going to be this niche thing for the early adopter crowd?
Right. Businesses can't just assume everyone's going to be over the moon about a robot waiter. Speaking of which, you won't believe this one person in the study actually compared a robot they encountered to a character from Star Wars.
No way. Seriously?
Yeah, it just shows you how much pop culture influences our expectations, even when it comes to something as everyday as, like, ordering a pizza.
Totally. We all walk in with these ideas in our heads, often from stuff we've seen on screen, and that can totally color our experience. We might be super happy or, bummed out, depending on how well the real thing matches up to those expectations.
It's like they say it's all about setting the stage. And speaking of setting the stage, this research actually went into a lot of detail about the way robots are designed and how even small differences can totally change how customers feel about the whole experience.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where things get really interesting. They actually looked at all kinds of robots, from the ones that just do simple stuff like bringing you your food, to the ones that are more, interactive, like taking your order or even giving you directions or something.
So not just like a glorified Roomba rolling around.
No, definitely not your grandma's Roomba. And the really interesting thing is how much people noticed the little details about the robots, like how they looked, how they moved, even the sound of their voice.
It's almost like we can't help but judge them like they're people, right?
It's true. There was even one person who said they wish they could just talk to the robot to control it instead of having to use a touchscreen.
I mean, that makes sense though, right? We're getting so used to just talking to our devices these days, like asking Alexa to play music or telling our smart home to turn off the lights.
Exactly. So maybe in a few years, we'll all be annoyed if we can't just chat with the robot waiter. Who knows?
Maybe. But it's not just about how their robots look and act, right? This study also found that the whole social situation, like who else is around, really changes how people feel about robot service.
Oh, for sure.
Like, if you're in a crowded restaurant, does it feel different?
Yeah, exactly. For some people, just seeing other people, especially kids, interacting with the robots was part of the fun. And even when robots were doing most of the work, having a few human staff members around, even if they were just there to help out, still made a difference for the overall experience.
So it's not as simple as saying robots are good or bad. It's about the whole package, the robot itself, the people, the atmosphere. It's that whole holistic experience thing we were talking about.
Exactly. And that's something businesses really need to think about.
Yeah.
A family with little kids is going to have different needs and expectations than someone who's just grabbing a quick coffee by themselves.
Totally. Another thing that really stuck out to me from this research was how people noticed when the robot service got better over time. Like they'd go back to the same place and the robot would be moving more smoothly, or maybe it would be a little faster, or would even have some new
Oh,
features.
yeah, that's really
Like it
interesting.
was a learning process for everyone involved.
The study actually talks about this idea of customers figuring out the rules of the game, like how to interact with the robots and what to expect. And people were definitely paying attention. They were noticing the changes and making up their minds about how well the whole thing was working.
I'm sure some people were more patient than others, though, especially in the beginning when maybe things weren't so smooth.
Oh, absolutely. The researchers even mentioned that some people were incredibly understanding when things went wrong. There's this one story about a person who actually got bumped into by a robot, and you know what they said?
What?
They were like, well, I guess GPS technology isn't perfect yet. Like, it was no big deal.
That's amazing. It kind of makes you wonder, does knowing that a robot is still learning, still under development, make us more forgiving of its mistakes?
Ah,
Or is there a limit? Like, how many times are you going to let a robot spill your drink before you just want a human waiter?
right. That's a great question. And, you know, that actually leads us to a fascinating part of this research. The whole idea of how robots and human staff can work together, like who does what. It wasn't always robots doing everything solo. You know, sometimes they were teaming up with the human staff.
Oh, interesting. So, like a robot-human dream team.
Exactly. The research found that sometimes the robots would be the main attraction, and other times they'd be more in the background, assisting the human workers.
Okay, so kind of like different places had different approaches. Makes sense.
Yeah, and get this, some people actually preferred to do certain things themselves, even when a robot could have done it for them.
Really? Like what? I'm trying to
Yeah.
imagine.
Or, for example, some people said they were happy for a robot to bring their food, but then they'd rather hand their plate to a human server instead of putting it on a tray or something.
Interesting. So maybe it's not about being completely waited on by a machine. It's more nuanced than that.
Right. It's like they want to feel involved, not just like a passive observer.
Yeah, like you're part of the experience. You're not just like being served by a robot army or something. Haha.
Exactly. The researchers actually called this experience co-creation, which is a fancy way of saying people want to feel engaged, not just, like they're at a robot show.
Right, right. It's all about finding that balance, isn't it? But it's not as easy as just like throwing a bunch of robots into a restaurant and hoping for the best.
Definitely not. It takes real thought. You have to consider the customer's point of view, how everything flows, and make sure the robots are actually adding to the experience, not making it weird or anything.
It's like the robots have to have good social skills too, not just be good at carrying plates.
Exactly. And that's something we're going to see more and more of. Robots that aren't just smart in a functional way, but also socially intelligent, able to pick up on cues and adapt to different situations.
Okay, so robots with people skills. Got it. Now, I got asked about this one finding from the research that really surprised me, apparently. About half the people they talked to said that being served by a robot didn't really affect their overall experience that much.
It's funny how the novelty can wear off, right? What seems super exciting at first can become pretty normal after a while.
That's so true. Like, remember when those touchscreen ordering kiosks first showed up in fast food places? Now it's like, no big deal.
Exactly. And that just goes to show that robots aren't a magic solution for every business.
Right. It's not like just add robots and boom, instant success.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to think about the context. Does it actually make sense to have robots in this particular setting? A robotic bartender might be a huge hit in a trendy bar, but maybe not so much in a cozy family-run restaurant.
It's all about matching the technology to the atmosphere and the customers you're trying to reach, right?
Absolutely. And that leads us to another interesting thing. The research found people's expectations for how much they want to interact with robots actually changes depending on the setting.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that.
So think about it. If you're rushing to catch a flight and you just want to grab a quick coffee, you probably don't want to have a long conversation with a barista, robot, or human. You just want your coffee, right?
Right. Efficiency is key in that situation.
Yeah, exactly. But now imagine you're on a romantic dinner date. Suddenly that human touch, that personal connection becomes way more important.
It's all about reading the room, sensing the vibe.
And that's the really exciting thing about the future of robots in hospitality. It's not just about replacing humans with machines. It's about finding that sweet spot where they work together, where robots enhance those human interactions, not replace them entirely.
I love that, finding that synergy between technology and the human touch. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, everything from robot design to the social dynamics of robot-human interactions. It's clear that this is a topic with a lot of layers.
Absolutely. And as robots keep getting smarter and more capable, it's more important than ever to think about the ethical implications, to make sure we're using this technology in a way that benefits everyone.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. It's been fascinating to take this deep dive into the world of robot hospitality, and it's clear that this is just the beginning of the conversation.
Definitely not the end, more like the first chapter.
Exactly. So, listeners, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on all this? Do you love the idea of robot service, or does it make you a little uneasy? Head over to our social media and tell us what you think, because this is a future we're all creating together.